All right, so let me talk a bit about the structure of the course, because last time, I got a little ahead last time, and so I changed this. We did the first chapter last time, which is not where I had it on the schedule. I realized I'm pulling ahead, which is fine. And so I'm going to do the second chapter today and a bit of a demo. Next time I'm going to demonstrate the first Velociraptor project, which is several weeks ahead. And after that, I'm going to add an extra topic, Android app security. It won't be on the final exam or anything, so people that are only worried about compliance, I observe, when I taught before here, a lot of students are very pressured and they're just trying to do the bare minimum to finish this course because they're worried about their other courses. So I'll warn you when I throw in extra things that are not officially part of the course material. But anyway, I'll talk about Android app security and then do more Velociraptor demos. That's my plan for the next couple of weeks, and I'll be filling in the rest of this as we get there. There's more time in class than there was last semester, and I've changed the content of the class quite a bit, so I'm adjusting what we cover. Anyway, by the way, has anybody got any questions about anything? If anybody wants to add, just make an online request and I'll approve it. All right. All right, if no questions, let's take a look at chapter 2. All right. So, incident readiness is the next thing. Mentioned before, you cannot trust defensive measures like firewall and antivirus anymore. They serve a purpose. They stop the weaker attacks, but there are powerful attacks that punch right through them like they aren't there, and therefore you must be ready for that. And by the way, the same thing is true of personnel security. You hire people, presumably you verify their resume, although 3/4 of people don't, so you can just totally lie and claim to have degrees you don't have, and experience you don't have, and awards you don't have, and there are all these scandals as all kinds of people are discovered to have important positions with totally faked credentials. So obviously most companies don't even bother to do the basic due diligence of calling somebody at your previous place of employment and saying, did this guy really work there? You really should be doing that, but most people don't. But that's for humans. And even after you've done whatever diligence you do, your humans can betray you. They can be bribed, they can get disgruntled, they could have been spies or enemy agents from a foreign company or a foreign nation all along. And these days, they could be completely fake people. North Koreans are posing as Europeans and getting jobs with fake profiles, often AI generated, and they are hiring Americans to run proxy farms so they can have IP addresses and machines that are in the United States. You think you're hiring an American, and in fact, you're hiring a North Korean spy. So you can't trust your people very much, and everybody knows that. So you have to have response plans for what when your people do a bad thing. And the same thing with your computers and all your software. It might be bad even when you've taken every effort to clean it up. So you have to have a process planning how to deal with an incident, prepare your people, and prepare your technology for it. So you're planning before the incident. Usually when people first get hacked, they have no idea what to do and they run around confused and scared and don't know what to do. If you're a large company, what you do is you just hire an expensive incident response company like Mandiant, who will fly in a team of experts and charge you a pile of money and really solve the problem. That's why you're not messing around, you hire them. But you can't do that all the time, and you certainly don't do it for your smaller incidents. And having an internal incident response team of some degree is necessary if you move at all up from the very bottom in security maturity. So you have an instant response plan. You have a plan what you're going to do. You have to define what you are going to cover in your incident response plan, what part of the company, what part of the software is covered, who's in charge, what roles people have. And somebody has to have the role that they can declare an incident. They can decide what we have here is not just a customer support problem or a hardware failure. What we have here is actually a security incident, and now we must have our security incident response plan go. You got to consider the legal consequences, the HR, public relations, and leadership. When there was a fake incident at City College of San Francisco about 10 years ago, I used this in all my classes as an example of how to do everything wrong. The chief technology officer did not tell anybody at the college anything. He brought in Chronicle reporters to give them a tour of a lab to tell them everything was infected, and we all woke up on Monday with the headline article being 10,000 computers infected at City College, and the college does nothing about it. And then people would call me saying, what's going on, as if I know anything. I don't know anything. They don't know anything. They don't know if they should come to work. They don't know if it's safe to log in. They don't know if they need a new credit card number. Nobody knows anything, and he wouldn't say anything. You ask him, he'd say, I've locked down all the machines pending an FBI investigation. It turned out that my FBI contacts were better than his FBI contacts, and that started a war that went on for a year that ended up with him getting fired and pushed out in disgrace. But that's the wrong thing to do. What you do when you have an incident is you consider what effect it has on your own employees, and then you tell your help desk and your public relations office, what should we tell people? People are all going to call us now. Our customers are going to call us. Our vendors with partnerships are going to call us and say, oh my God, what does this mean? You have to have a clear answer for them. So first you have to investigate it and decide what happened and how bad it is and what it means, to consider your legal requirements, and then make careful statements to tell everybody what they need to know. Everybody's going to ask the obvious questions. Did they get my money? Can I still do my job? What do I have to do? Change my password? Is the whole company going to vanish and go broke? These are all sensible questions people are going to have, and you have to have answers for all these questions before you go public. So you test your plan, you retain outside counsel if you need to, which many small companies will have to. They'll have to hire outside experts to help them, and you're probably regulated in the modern America, depending on your business. If you're banking, you're regulated by banking regulations. If you handle medical data, it's HIPAA. If you handle credit cards, it's PCI. There is probably an external agency with compliance rules you must meet. And that's important as considering what you're allowed to do and what your response must be. So there are various models out there to guide you. National Institute of Standards from U.S. government has a 4-phase model. You prepare for incidents, you detect something bad happening and analyze it, then you contain, which means you stop the fire from spreading, usually by segmenting out part of the network, then you clean out the bad stuff, eradication, and then you recover, which means you restore everything back to proper business functionality. And then you have post-incident activity, something people often skip, but it's very important. You have to have a post-mortem where you say, okay, let's review the whole thing. How did this all work, and how do we improve our system so we're better prepared next time? Because it's the cycles of this that make your company better. And you'll see this in education and every modern industry. If you do ISO 27000 compliance or almost anything, I expect you to see a closed loop where you define what you're trying to accomplish, you do it, then you measure how well it worked, and then you improve. And every cycle. You have to do this because everything keeps changing. You can't just stick with the same plan. Attackers keep changing, technology keeps changing, and so every modern business process is expected to be a closed loop of state your goal, perform the task, measure the effect, and then improve, and continuously improve to keep up with the rapidly changing world. Here's another version of it named for these things: preparation, identification, containment, eradication, recovery, and lessons learned. You notice it's the same process, just broken up into slightly different steps. And here's another one from the NIST cybersecurity framework, pointing out what's missing from the others is there should be a governing layer. A governance is your management making sure that all these things happen. Your hands-on technical team is doing things like detecting the malware and responding to it and recovering the systems, but you have to have a governance layer monitoring all these things to make sure they're done correctly and that they're in compliance with other considerations like legal requirements, and that you have a steady improvement plan. This is the point of a company. You have hands-on technical people that do one little piece, and you have management above them that should be making sure that everything is working together to accomplish the long-term goal. All right, so then you got escalation. This is an issue. You have to escalate from like, for example, if somebody complains that their machine is not working, they can't reach the internet, well, first you say that's just a tech support issue. Maybe we need to fix that machine, replace the network card or something. But if then you find virus on it, then you say, well, maybe this is worse. Then maybe you try to see if you have the virus elsewhere. Then at some point you decide we've got a security incident here. Something has broken our security policy. That's escalation. You have to have a chain of command. People have to know who you call when you suspect that there's a security incident, something bad has happened which violates our security policy, and that person has to have the authority to declare an incident, which costs money. When you declare an incident and go into incident response, you're going to start shutting down servers, turning off network connections, re-imaging machines, and therefore you're going to shut down business processes. You're going to interrupt the process of the business. So it's not something you do casually, and someone has to have the authority to declare that incident and take that effect. You can also have time-boxed escalation. This is very common. One of my students was working at Cloudflare and shared my room at a hotel at DEF CON, and he was up all night because he was on, each one of them took turns being on call for 24 hours. And what happened is when a bad thing happened, the system would automatically call the person on call, and if they didn't call back within 5 minutes, it would go to the next one and the next one. So all the people who were on call were really sure to respond quickly because you would get hell when you went back to the office the next day if you didn't do it, and the next guy had to be woken up who wasn't ready for that. So he was there at 2 a.m. in his bed typing Unix commands on his phone, trying to fix problems that the automatic systems couldn't fix. And so you got your internal communication, real important. You have to tell everybody affected at your company that there's an incident, it's going to cause an outage. Here's what you tell your people, your customers, your workers, your partners. Your external people get notified, and you should have a plan if the primary channel is compromised. One thing that happens a lot is the bad guys getting your email server. Now they can see everything you're saying. So you have to have another method of communication, like Signal or something. And you have to be aware when it's time to switch to the more secure mode of communication, because the bad guy is probably monitoring the other one. This is what the famous homeless hacker did. Kevin Mitnick, and there was another guy at the same time, in the 90s. He was running from the FBI for a couple of years. The FBI was chasing him as the #1 wanted hacker in America, and he was always ahead of them because he was in charge of the phone system. He totally understood hacking phone networks, so he was listening to all the FBI calling each other, making plans, and leaving taunting messages and rerouting them to pizza shops and just doing all sorts of irritating things, because he was just a teenage punk. He wasn't really trying to make money or anything. He was just trying to show off that he was smarter than everybody. And eventually, Kevin Mitnick admitted this was just like an addiction. I couldn't stop, even though it was bad for me. It was just the thrill of hacking. Anyway, then of course you got to have legal review before anything that goes outside the company. Any statement you make might get you in trouble, might say something you shouldn't say, admit something you shouldn't admit. Your legal should be reviewing the statements you make out there to make sure that you don't dig yourself in a bigger hole. This is why anybody that shows up in court without a lawyer is famously a fool. You need a lawyer. Even if you think you know what's going on, you don't, because the law is complicated. And you say the wrong thing, you dig yourself deeper. All right, so your team, of course, because they're counting on it. So you need to have a manager, which I mentioned before, the person that coordinates the response, that knows what's going on. You need to have an investigator that's essentially a detective, and that's largely what we're going to cover in this course, how you analyze the network to find evidence of attacks. We'll do a lot of that in Splunk and some of it in Velociraptor. Then you have threat intelligence analysts. These are people that know about who might be attacking you. External threat intelligence is a big issue these days, although people say it's not as valuable as they hoped. But a lot of people do subscribe to threat intelligence feeds, who's attacking who, what techniques are they using out there. And forensic analysts are the detailed people that analyze images of computers and memory to see what's going on there. And of course, like I mentioned, legal and compliance. Legal issues like, are we going to get sued for negligence or something? Are we guilty of losing data that's going to hurt people and will they get sued for that? Or do we have compliance? We just have a compliance framework, which is really just a long checklist. You must do this, you must do that. And are we in compliance with all those rules? That's your legal team. I should mention, if you want a job in cybersecurity, the most exciting jobs are like Red Team right on the front lines, or the Defenders right on the front lines, where it's like being a combat soldier. You're in all weekend, in all night, responding to emergencies, flying to remote locations to save them. That's a very exciting job, and some people want that because they're young and energetic and they want the most exciting job. Other people would like to go home at 5 and have a family and have a wife and not stay up all night. And in that case, what you do is you move down to like legal and compliance or financial, where it's not an emergency, in fact, by design, because you don't want people making stupid emergency financial decisions. You want them to go home at 5 and get some sleep and come back and think it over tomorrow. So this is where you go if you want a regular job that will end at 5. I've been to industry reps have come to give talks, and people in the audience have asked, what about work-life balance? And all the guests we ever had have said, oh yeah, work-life balance. I've heard of that. I don't have any of that. I work all the time. That's all I ever do. And the students are like, I don't want to hear that. I was hoping to have a job that would like end at 5 so I could do something else, which is not unreasonable. And this is where you go if you want that. It's not as exciting, it's not groundbreaking, it's making sure that all the rules are followed and the forms are filed and all that jazz, like taxing and HR. Those are the people that get to go home at 5. Anyway, then you've got your IT ops, maintaining the network, and as you probably know, those guys do not get to go home at 5. When I became a college teacher, I was working at a financial company, and I took night classes to learn the next database we needed to run, and I missed half the classes because there was an emergency at work and I had to stay late. So I said, man, when I'm a teacher, I'm going to be very forgiving for people who are late and miss class because I know what it's like. Here, you guys have dormitories and presumably don't have jobs and stuff, so maybe they expect you to show up on time. But when you're teaching adults in the field, you can't assume that at all because they have jobs and families and kids and broken cars and commutes and all that jazz. So anyway, then you got communications people, public relations. You have to have an executive that believes in what you're doing. This is the fundamental flaw that most cybersecurity professionals make when they are new to the field. You join a company, you see something, you get all mad about it. We're not encrypting this, we're not using the right version of this, we're doing this dangerous thing, and you can't get anybody to care because you're the new guy, you're whining about something, and usually presenting it poorly, usually babbling about technical stuff to people that aren't really knowledgeable about the technical stuff. And it's very common, you get frustrated, mad about something, and nobody cares. You have to learn how to communicate better. And the rule that you'll learn in CISSP training is don't try to change anything unless you can convince somebody in the C-suite to support you. You need a champion so powerful that they can spend money, they can allocate resources. If you cannot convince somebody high up that you are right and things have to be done, then shut up, because all you'll do is destroy yourself. You can't allocate resources from the bottom. You can't make a change from the bottom. You can only make a change from the top. So your job is to learn how to communicate effectively with the C-suite. And there are two important rules here. One is you cannot influence someone if you don't respect them. They will know it just like a dog knows it. A dog knows if you don't like them. You can't change it. They aren't going to listen to you if you don't respect them. And the other thing is you have to leave it to them. You have to inform them and then back off and stop being pushy if they don't get along with it. It's an art. That's why I say a whole lot of this work is non-technical. It's dealing with people. Relating to people is very, very important. The technical part is only a small part of it. If all you know is the technical part and you're bad with people, you will be greatly restricted to stay at the bottom forever, because you can't really move up to any position of responsibility if you can't work with the people above you and the people around you and below you. Anyway, then you got these other issues, and you may even have a law enforcement liaison if their law enforcement is involved in your response. This is something most companies try to avoid. Most companies would rather solve the problem internally and avoid a big scandal. And also, if you involve law enforcement, you can't turn them off. So they usually prefer to avoid getting involved with courts and law enforcement. You don't usually have to. If you have people inside your company doing a bad thing, you can just fire them or demote them or something. You don't need law enforcement. But sometimes you do. Sometimes it's so big, so important, or your industry is so important, you have to get involved with law enforcement. And then that's a whole nother issue of how you deal with them. So you got to have tabletop exercises. I know a guy that runs these. He said they're very exciting. People really like them. You just get together all the people and you talk about it. Okay, here's the scenario. This location goes down. They have a virus outbreak, and this customers are calling in saying somebody found their data. What do you do? And then you say, you have representatives of all the teams. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? It turns out, until you do this, most people do not know what they would do. They don't know who they would call. They don't know whose job it would be to inform people and such. And you just talk it through. And these things are organized by incident response companies and consultants. I know people that do it. And they say it's very helpful for companies. You don't have any hands-on at all. It's just talking at the management level, who's going to do what. The red team, purple team is the hands-on stuff. The red team is the attack team. Companies have red teams. I say I was very surprised how many of my students got jobs doing pen testing on red teams. I thought there'd have to be 100 defenders for every attacker, but it's not that ratio at all. A lot of attackers that practice attacking their own companies and stuff to find the flaws first. And the purple team is where the red and the blue work together inside your company. The attack and defense team together inside your own company. We're going to send this attack, and now we go to the defenders. Did you pick that up? How are you going to change your processes to detect it? How are you going to respond to it? These are internal activities where you practice being hacked and responding to it, so you're hopefully more ready when the real attackers come. Then, of course, technical drills where you just practice your activities, like the homework you get in these classes where you practice finding malware on a system, analyzing memory images, and so on. Training, cross-training across multiple skills. This is something the military understands that companies often do not, is individual people are often unavailable. They are sick, they have quit, they have been fired, they're on vacation. You can't have, oh, you can't do that until Wednesday, until Joe comes back. But there's an emergency today. You have to have a plan for what, when this guy is not available, who else can take over, and make sure they're really ready to take over, which, like I said, the military has this. The officer may not be available, and they have a clear plan of who takes over. And then, I mentioned before, after everything, you have a review at the end saying what happened, what worked, what didn't, how are we going to improve this so we're to do better next time. That's an important step. And then you got to prepare that's preparing your people. Then you got to prepare your technology. The most important issue is logging. The default logging on a Windows machine or a firewall or a server is just to handle maintenance issues. So if it breaks, you can figure out how to fix it, which is all it's intended for. But to respond to attacks, you typically want to have a lot more. So you want to include a lot more logs. Windows event logs can be very helpful if you turn on enough logging. Sysmon is extremely important. We're going to use it in the Spunk projects. Sysmon is a tool you add to Windows systems to make the logs far more useful. The default Windows logs are incredibly detailed. They will give you like 100 events if all you do is open a folder and create a notepad file. This will give you one event that's clear: file created, process created, network connection made, registry key changed. Simple thing you can easily understand with all the additional information you need, like the hash of the file. So that's what Sysmon does. It boils down the Windows event logs down to much more useful logs for incident response. Network monitoring is real important. NetFlow keeps track a summary of network events. And the original purpose of NetFlow was to bill people for their network usage. This person connected to that server and transmitted a file with this protocol for this many bytes. It doesn't record all the data. It records a summary of each data, intending to give the same kind of information as a telephone pen test, pin log, the word for it, pin trace, I think, where it keeps track of who you called and for how long, just to bill you. That's what NetFlow does. Full packet capture is the alternative. You record all the packets. This is very expensive, a large amount of data, and not very commonly done anymore because almost everything is encrypted anyway. So even if you have the packets, you can't easily reconstruct it. Sometimes this is done, but you try to avoid it. DNS logs are extremely useful. You just record all the resolutions of alphabetical domain names to addresses. This is extremely helpful. If you just record all the DNS resolutions at your company, it's a very small file, just one line of text for every connection, and it tells you probably what you really want to know. It tells you what everybody is doing. It tells you the source address, you know who they are, it tells you what domain they went to, and what time they did it. So this way you can catch people that are going to malicious sites and getting infected, people that are playing games or viewing porn at work. You can totally track everything very easily. DNS logs are extremely information rich and small, very useful. Now people are freaking out because we finally have encrypted DNS options where it would all be encrypted, and companies often forbid that because they want to keep tracking what everyone's doing with unencrypted DNS. EDR is your antivirus, the fancier name for the more modern version. This is your endpoint suite that protects you. It detects some suspicious activity and blocks it. It's an important part of your defense. You should be having it monitored from a central point of control to make sure that it's up to date and working everywhere. That's one thing that went wrong at City College of San Francisco. There was a lab where the machines were too slow, so they turned off the antivirus and nobody knew. So they got infected in that lab. You should have a central point where you know that everybody's EDR is working. And you can have remote triage capability, would be nice, where you can actually get the samples of the malware off a machine remotely. The more expensive suites, you'll have that. And SIM, the leading SIM is Splunk, which we'll use in this class. That's Security Information and Event Manager. It is a single point that gathers all the information about the security of your network in one place so you can search through it and ask important questions. It basically tracks down all the logs. So you have to have a lot of logs for all that. And this is a layout of what a security operations center is. You've got your Windows machines and your Linux machines and your network devices like firewalls and switches and routers, and they're all running agents that forward all that data, ingesting it to a central database, and then you have a searching head on the database, and this is typically Splunk. You have a bunch of data stored here, and you have a search head, which is a Splunk search head, so your team has a convenient way to search through all those logs quickly and efficiently correlate all those things. One thing you have to have is all the times have to be accurate. So these log events are not all inaccurate about the timing, and then you can draw timelines and figure out what people did, and we'll do all that in the projects. So your responders have to have the way to do a physical acquisition. This is particularly important for police who are like going to a crime scene and taking evidence, but it applies elsewhere too. You're going to go there and take images of the machines that were infected on site. So you carry around forensic operating systems, write blockers, which are hardware, so you can image a hard drive without changing it, and large capacity drives and cables and such to take forensic images of things to preserve the evidence for later analysis. And remote triage is what we're going to do here with Velociraptor, the main tool for this, where you can connect over the network to gather information from the devices that you think might be involved in the attack. And typically what you do is you do targeted acquisition of just the information that will help you. You don't try to image the whole hard drive or all the RAM. You get just a certain amount of information, like some registry keys, recently created files, that sort of thing. And the expensive versions of forensic suites like Encase and FTK, the $100,000 versions for enterprises, have all these remote features. They can do everything remotely. Because one thing that happens is somebody is stealing money from your company. You find out. You now suspect that it is a company employee, perhaps an important company employee in a high position. You want to investigate that without telling them. If you put them on leave and seize their computer and investigate them, they'll probably be insulted and quit if they're innocent. So what you can do with a modern forensic suite is you can image their whole machine and record everything it's doing over the network during a day while they're working without them noticing. It's just some more network traffic leaving. That is quite useful. That's how you investigate people without letting them know it, so you don't have to have an unpleasant conversation with them if they're innocent. Anyway, an important thing to know as far as your rights, everything you do on company machine is company property, and they have the right to inspect it at any time. At one point, they got mad at me at the college, and they put remote monitoring software on my computer. I just saw it, didn't use it, used a different computer. But they had the right to do that on the company machine. It's one of the reasons I started buying my own machines. I said, well, I really shouldn't be using company machines. But people got all mad at me now and then. That's part of, if you do teach security stuff, especially in the early days, it made you really suspicious. DEF CON was forbidden. They were really afraid of hackers. It's not that forbidden anymore, but it was in the early days. Then you have to have business continuity and disaster recovery. How are you going to recover if something really bad happens, like a ransomware outbreak? You figure out the recovery time objective is how long things can be down and you can tolerate it. Like if you're a web business like Google, you probably can't tolerate your web server being down for even 5 minutes. You want it to stay up. On the other hand, you have a billing department where you're billing people that owe you money for supplies. That could probably be down for 30 days and it wouldn't really matter. You can just collect later. So you figure out how long can you live without a particular system. The recovery point objective is if you do recover data, what data do you get? Do you back up every night? In that case, you might lose a whole day worth of work. If you back up every week, you might lose a whole week worth of work. So you decide if it's worth doing that. You can go with the most expensive option, which is constant, continuous backup all day long, so you can recover right up to the minute when a bad thing happened. And that means you don't have to redo any work, but it does mean you have to pay a lot more for all that continuous backup. Make sure your backups are isolated. They should not be on the network, especially since ransomware gangs now know this, and they will destroy not only your data, they will find your backups, your ghost images, your cloud storage like Dropbox, and delete all that too. So you have to make sure you have backups that are isolated from the network and off-site, because if the building burns down, then what good are your backups if they're in that building? You got to have them off-site and off the network. And you have to test them. Company I worked at, the thing about backups is it doesn't go to the customer. So at the company I worked at, they took all the people on the IT team and they put them on stuff serving customers, and they took the idiot and put him on backup, because who cares? And he was the guy that was always out smoking joints at the dumpster on his lunch break. And when we went for the backups, he hadn't been changing the tapes. We're supposed to change the tapes every day. He hadn't been changing the tapes, so we didn't really have any backups. If you don't test them, you don't have them. It might be a year before you go for the backups, and then you've got to have a regular plan. Just restore something from backup, just to make sure it's really happening, because if it wasn't, you would never know. This is the problem. There are a lot of problems that don't appear until you test for them, like I think I mentioned before, maybe not in this class, open API endpoints. Your web servers offer web pages, but they also offer inputs for signals from mobile phones, where you say, I want to get just the address of this person, just the picture of this person, just their latest tweets or something. Those are called API endpoints, and very, very many companies have open API endpoints where there is something you can request and it forgets to verify that you've logged in first. This happens all the time because you can set it up that way and nobody will notice for years. Everything works, everything is fine. It isn't until the bad guy tries to do the unauthorized thing that you know that was necessary. Like the backups. You'll never know they're broken, not until you need them. Anyway, then you have your incident response plan, your business continuity plan have to reference each other, so you got a plan if bad things happen. And the main thing that scares people these days is ransomware. Although, nowadays they would be wise to be very, very afraid of supply chain attacks, because those are expanding like crazy. So you should have deception techniques to protect the defenders. These are honeypots and honey nets. Well, the best thing to do is get a Think Canary token or Think Canary server. They're a company that sells these. There are free ones tokens, you just put an extra email address or web address in your documents in your databases that you never use. And if somebody steals your data, they'll use it. And as soon as it's used, you're alerted. So you have your customer records, you put in a few extra customers that aren't real customers. It doesn't hurt you any, but when bad guys steal your data, if an email goes to that address, you're warned. Wait, somebody just stole your data. That way you know you've been compromised. Otherwise, most companies never know they've been hit, not until typically 9 months later. So anyway, those are canary tokens. There's also honeypots and honeynets, which are systems or whole networks online that are not real systems. They're there to detect when you're being attacked, and that's what Thinks will sell you. They'll sell you hardware that you put in your network that turns into anything you want it to be, a database, domain controller, whatever you want, impersonates it very well, and alerts you as soon as a bad guy goes in there. So hopefully you can tell when you're under attack quickly enough to save your stuff. That's quite useful. And here's an example of that. So if somebody's scanning your network, one simple honeypot is just your unused IP addresses. So you have a whole range of IP addresses. You're only using some of them. The traffic that goes to invalid IP addresses, you could throw it away, but it would be a lot better to send it to an analyzer and say, wait, somebody is sending traffic to the IP addresses we're not using. That's a bad guy scanning our network. That's not a legitimate customer or employee trying to do work. So I should know that's happening and keep a record of it and alert people. We are under attack from this guy. You can block that IP address. You can respond. Now you can check to see, did they already get away with something? So that's one simple kind of honeypot. Let you know when you're under attack. All right, so anyway, you have to be prepared. You have to have documented process, trained people, and the right tools, enough logs to know what's happening. Deception techniques can greatly help you detect attacks, and tabletop exercises are useful even with no technical component. And that's whatever you do, you have to continuously improve it. And this applies to all business processes these days, not just the IT and not just the security. Everything you're doing, you should be continuously improving it because the world changes really fast. And if you keep doing the same thing, you're going to fall behind. Anyway, let's try Kahoot. This is chapter 2 Kahoot. I should have them ready to go. There we are. All right. Coming in. I'll wait a bit. All right. Looks like maybe not. All right. I'll wait a bit. All right, let's do it. All right, so what's a canary token? A fake resource, like an email address, that triggers an alert when an attacker uses it. All right, Why should the CSIRT members be cross-trained? Obviously, because you operate on an emergency basis like police, you can't wait for the unavailable person to come. You have to be able to operate even when people are missing. All right, what's the primary responsibility of the intelligence analyst? Gathering threat data, telling them what sort of attacks are happening in your industry, what kind of things are going on, what they should be watching out for. All right. Gonna have to tell me their name. My name looks like a real name, however.